And it's, to some degree, I don't think it's such a coincidence that Nigun, as this spiritual practice that seemed to come out of relatively nowhere in the early 1700s, that it would be so universal. It came first taught, at least accredited to, the Baal Shem Tov, who, and I will expand this picture. These are the Carpathian Mountains. And no one's exactly sure where the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Chassidic movement in the 1700s, where he came from, but he spent a lot of time in these Carpathian Mountains, they landed in Ukraine, but some people think that he was actually from Moldova. Essentially, after spending likely more than a decade in these mountains and learning from some of the people who lived there, which included quite a diverse group. It included Eastern Orthodox monastic orders, people who were using chant and prayer in order to get in touch with the divine. It also included, for lack of a better term, mountain folk, people who, like the Baal Shem Tov, were herbal healers, were healers who used amulets, and a few of them were mystics, like he was. A Baal Shem, in fact, we think of the Baal Shem Tov, it means the master of the good name. A Baal Shem was a profession, or at least some kind of hobby or trade at the time. A Baal Shem healed people with angelic names on amulets. Some of them were herbal remedy experts, and some of them, like the Baal Shem Tov, were mystics. There are stories of his mystical ascents into other worlds. These same type of ascents, by the way, you'll hear described in Jewish literature in many different eras as ways in which songs are heard in the first place. Some of these Niggunim, there's stories about them being heard from beyond or in a dream. But essentially, if we think about it today in our terms, a word we might use for someone who's an herbal remedy expert, who heals with divine names and who makes mystical journeys into other worlds, the word for that commonly is a shaman. A Baal Shem was a profession that, without even too much interpretation, could be called a Jewish shaman from that particular era in Eastern Europe. The Baal Shem Tov seemingly emerged from the mountains for some people. They said he was sort of scruffy, like he didn't look well kempt compared to a lot of other folk. And you could imagine, I mean, this is the sunny picture. This probably looked like this a lot during the year. It was not a warm climate. And he begins to teach. And his teachings were specifically aimed at being accessible. This is what the Chassidic movement became. It was what you could call a popular spiritual movement, as opposed to the Kabbalah, the sort of prior era of Jewish mysticism that existed, which was more of an elite practice. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't be admitted to the circle so easily to study Kabbalah. You could study for decades and then be able to open up those books and hear the oral transmissions from your teachers. Contrary to that, Hasidism was about direct access in a much more immediate sense. Think about the Nigun. This is when the Nigun emerges. I do not know, I don't think anyone knows truly where it came from. I like to think that the Baal Shem Tov either heard it from some mystical plane or heard it from other similarly minded people in the mountains. But no matter where it came from, it was, in its origins, an incredibly easy access point to a spiritual experience.